Welcome to Fun and Fundraising, everybody, the podcast where we talk with people behind top nonprofit galas and signature fundraising events to showcase how they positively transform their communities. I'm your host, Rob Giardinelli, and today I am really excited to have my good friend Steve Kemble on as a guest. Steve is America's sassiest lifestyle guru, and he's also a phenomenal event planner. Produces some of the most fun and fabulous events, both commercially and from a nonprofit perspective in Texas. And I wanted to do kind of a deep dive into what makes a fabulous event, and I couldn't think of anyone more fun to do this with than Steve. So Steve, thank you so much for taking the time. We are so excited to have you here today.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here, and especially with you. I love it. We're going to have a whole lot of fun and give everybody a whole lot of valuable information about how to have fun in fundraising. Because if we're not having fun, then we really shouldn't be doing it, right?
Absolutely. Any event needs to have fun. If you suck the fun out of it, no one is going to want to go. That's absolutely, you've already given the best piece of advice I've had in probably the entire history of this podcast, and we just started. So that is, thank you for sharing that. And, I want to start, because you are such a passionate person, and what I've always loved about you is you commit 150% to anything you do. When you're in, you're in. And I know that that comes from passion. So talk about where your passion from producing and participating in fabulous events comes from.
Well, I've always loved bringing people together. And I think that is such a core principle of any event. Bringing people together from all walks of life is just so much fun and rewarding. And I also love creating experiences. And I think that when you're doing that, it's real important. I always tell people, like, when we're planning an event, I'm like, okay, we're going to create an experience. And something that we have to do is so simple, but it's overlooked so many times. We have to engage everyone's senses. There has to be some element of the event that they smell, something that they taste, something that they see, something that they hear, and something that they touch. And if we can hit all five of those, we are on such a road to success.
I have never thought about events from the five senses perspective. And that's fascinating. Of those five, which have you found is the hardest for events to really master and get? Which of those five is the most difficult
I
and
think
most challenging?
the most difficult of the five senses is probably the smell, simply because you don't want to overpower. It's like, for example, when we're using candles at events, I always tell people, a lot of times you might go to an event and the candles on the table might be scented, but that scent might be allergic to some people. It might be offensive to somebody. They may not like the smell of vanilla candles, burning on the table. Or if you're working with a chef, it's like, oh my gosh, nobody wants to walk into a room that smells completely of garlic. And even though that's such a critical element to making it taste like so fabulous, we don't necessarily want to smell it as we walk in. So you've got to master that. It's got to be the perfect balance of let's have a Kentucky Derby party, but let's let them all walk in the room and it smells of roses. And it's not too overpowering, but it just sets such an amazing tone. But it's one of the most difficult to work with.
I love that you gave the analogy of the Kentucky Derby party and the roses, because I was going to ask you, is there kind of a universal smell that kind of 98% of the population likes? But I like that you kind of brought it to, you tie the scent to the event in some way,
Right.
shape, or form. The run for the roses and the room smells of roses. And people
Exactly.
immediately just get into that, click with that. And, if you're going to a Kentucky Derby party, you're probably going to see roses. You may see
Yes.
roses there.
Yes.
Like anyone going and is allergic to roses, going to the Run for the Roses probably it's not the event for
Right.
you.
Exactly. But it can be a sweet 16 party that maybe, you
Mhm.
can do like a bubblegum scent. And it's so much fun. All the kids walk in, sweet 16, it's like, oh my gosh, it smells like bubblegum. It's just fabulous. I love it. I love
That
it.
that is amazing. That is fantastic. Now, I want to hear your journey and your path into the event space, because I don't think people realize the time and dedication it takes for what people like you do, and do it successfully, and do it successfully for years in different types of events. So I want to hear about that.
Yes, I absolutely have loved events ever since I was in high school. I was the decorations chairperson for our junior senior, that's when we combined them, junior senior prom in Georgetown, Texas, right outside of Austin. Georgetown, Texas. We did it in the high school cafeteria. Times have changed so
They
much.
have changed. They don't know what that, kids these days don't know what that is anymore. What, you would throw a prom in that? No.
Yes, it back then it was called the cafetorium because we used it for the cafeteria and the auditorium. Well, that's where our prom was. And I mean, just think about crepe paper streamers. That was what it was. It could be any theme in the world, and you just hung crepe paper streamers to create a tent effect over the cafetorium. But when I was that decorations chairperson, I was like, oh my gosh, I love this. So I went home to my parents my senior year, and I was like, I want to do events. And I like am so thankful that when I went to Texas State University, back then it was Southwest Texas State University, I went and talked to a career counselor, and I was like, I want to do events. And he was like, well, there's not really any specific event programs like there are now in colleges throughout the world, actually. And he said, you need to get your degree in public relations because if somebody's going to do an event, they're going to hire their PR agency or their ad agency, which is what is done to some extent today. But it was really, that was where all the big events were being handled back then. And I was like, oh my gosh, I think about that so much. I will never forget that moment sitting in his office. And I was like, I am so thankful that career counselor knew that. Because I mean, a lot of career counselors back then, about you want to do like parties, what? But he knew exactly what I was saying. So I got my degree in public relations, graduated from college, went to work on Jim Collins' campaign. He was a United States congressman, amazing. He was a Republican, represented the Highland Park and University Park area of Dallas, right where SMU is and all that. And he decided he wanted to run for the U.S. Senate seat against Lloyd Bentsen. So he gave up his congressional seat. He was a self-made millionaire. The Collins family has given so much money to the city of Dallas. You'll see their name on various buildings throughout the city. He never accepted a congressional salary. So he basically funded this senatorial campaign on his own and brought me on to do his events, his campaign events. So I traveled all over the state with his wife doing campaign events that would help the campaign. Well, he ended up losing that election. It's kind of hard, as they say back then in Texas, like, really? You're going to run against Lloyd Bentsen? It's just not
Yeah.
done. So we lost the election, and I went to him. He did all these debriefs with everybody that was on his staff, and I was like, okay, so you lost the election. Now what am I going to do for a job? And he was like, really? And I'm like, no, really. So he said, you know what? I know of a job opening at the Dallas Chamber of Commerce. And he goes, it's in the PR department. I will set up the interview, but you're on your own after that. So I went down there, interviewed for the job. I got it, and it was just so fascinating. That was when the Dallas television show was crazy popular all over the world. And my job was to do events all over the world, many times with the cast, would travel with us. Larry Hagman, Linda Gray, Victoria Principal, Bobby Hewing, all of those, Patrick Duffy, all of those people would travel with us. It was fascinating to promote tourism back to the city of Dallas. We were doing these events in London, Berlin, I mean, Japan, Mexico. You think about it, everywhere. I was all over the world. It was so fascinating. Well, then the Statue of Liberty was being restored in New York, and Lee Iacocca was heading up that effort. And they came to Dallas. They talked to my boss. My boss asked me to sit in on this meeting because they wanted to open up an office in Dallas to cover Texas and all the contiguous states around Texas to do grassroots celebrations to kind of coincide with what was happening in New York. So they left after meeting with my boss, and I was like, that sounds fascinating. I want that job. My boss was like, you have a job. I'm like, yeah, I know I have a job, but I want to do this job for 2 years, and then I'll come back to this job. So, my friends were like, I really didn't know about what that was, but then my friends were like, say you want a leave of absence, say you want to leave. I was like, okay, whatever that is. I said, I'm asking for a leave of absence to go do this. I mean, I wasn't like in any position to be asking that, but my boss ended up giving me the leave of absence. And so I did it for 2 years. It was fascinating. And then I came back to him at the end of 2 years and said, I'm not coming back. And he was like, I knew you wouldn't come back. But he is still a mentor of mine to this day because he just let me go and do my thing. So I came back, and that's when I started my own company. And I've been doing it ever since, doing events literally all over the world. And I love it. I absolutely love it.
Wow, that is, I mean, I never knew that about you, and that is just such a cool background and a fascinating story. And there's like so many different questions that I could have ask, but I want to
Well,
do.
everything they say about politics, good and bad, is true. We'll leave it at that.
Oh, the politics is great, but I was actually more, what is it like planning events when the zeitgeist is happening? Because when you were doing stuff with Dallas as, a kid fresh out of college, really,
Right.
how did you, I guess, keep yourself grounded and keep your focus on the events when you're dealing with literally the most famous people in the world at that time?
It was so, I think back then, I stepped into that role at such a young age, like you say, and basically right out of college. I think that what kept me so focused at that point was like, I am like quasi terrified, and I have to do this. Like, this is not like, oh, let's go to Berlin and like, have a fabulous time. I'm like, oh my gosh, this has to be perfect, perfect. And like I said, my boss was a wonderful mentor, but there was so much of it that I was like learning on my own because back then as well, there weren't organizations like NACE and MPI and ILEA and all of these industry associations that we have right now that have been so valuable for continuing education, if you will, and learning about leadership and all of that. Those didn't exist back then, and so I was literally learning it as I went along. And that's what I think made me like just love the events industry even more, because it gave me like the opportunity to try some things and do some things. And it's one of those things like they always say, if you failed at something, you're like, okay, that's not going to work, and let's not do that in the future. But it's just, God, it was just like I say, I think the thing that got me through it most of all was being terrified that I would misstep in some way. And now I tell people, it's like, if you misstep while you're learning something, that's okay. Just, take a step back and why did I misstep and how can I improve on that the next time?
So I want to turn the conversation a little bit. I'm glad you were talking about, missteps. And really, there's all different types of events. And, I think it would be good to understand, because kind of what makes for a great, I don't like using the word perfect because it could be perfect in the eyes of me, but I know as an event planner, even if everyone's having a rip roaring time, it may mean dinner served 5 minutes late and the food's, there's always something. And I totally
Right.
get that with events. But talk about the differences between, there's really kind of four main genres of events that we primarily cover. That's weddings, birthday parties, galas, corporate events, and talk about the differences and how you approach each type of event differently.
Yeah, I think that like weddings and birthday parties and galas, I think that those are, you know, they're generally hospitality in nature, and they're focused on they're entertainment focused. And so therefore they're like it's hospitality, it's entertainment. And so they're social events. And that's not to say that there's not a business part to a lot of them, especially like a gala. I mean, yes, it's a social event, lots of hospitality, lots of entertainment, but there's also a business side of it in the sense of we need to raise some money and hit our fundraising goals. And then whereas on the other side, there's corporate events, and I think that I find those to be very targeted. Like, for example, when I go in and talk to a corporation and they say, we're looking to hire an event professional to do our event, usually the conversation is very targeted in the sense we're hiring a professional to do our annual meeting where we're going to roll out our goals for 2025, or we're hiring an event professional because we are going to launch an entire new product. So this is going to be a big brand a product launch. So those are very, very focused, or it's a corporate meeting where we're celebrating that we reached a milestone. So I found those to be very focused. Whereas on the other side, where weddings and charity galas and birthday parties and all that are somewhat open in the sense of they're looking a lot of times for ideas, whereas corporate's saying, this is what we need to do and this is what we need to achieve. Whereas on the other side of it, they're like, hey, what do you think our wedding should look like? What should this birthday party be about? Or what should be the theme of this fundraising gala? I mean, they're looking for direction in that regard, whereas the corporate side is really pretty much determined. Yeah, they want some ideas and creativity, but it's pretty much determined what direction they're going in.
Well, and I know we normally don't talk about corporate events, but I do want to ask this question because you ended your response with it. How do you inject as a top event producer, how do you inject your personality into a corporate event? Like how do you do that so that because I was in the corporate world for 15 years and so many of the things I went to were really, really boring. I wish you were producing all of them because I know I would have not have been bored. So talk a little bit about how you try to inject a fun in a corporate event, because every event has to have that. I don't care what type of event it is.
I totally agree. And a lot of times, it's like I will go in and talk to some of the most conservative corporations in America. And yes, they want their event to be, buttoned up and extremely professional, but they're also looking for something unique and different and creative. And it's, for example, it may be like I was just talking to a corporation today, and their event in Las Vegas is going to be absolutely amazing. But I was like, okay, you want these people to be here for 3 hours. So what we need to do to keep them engaged for 3 hours is we need to hit them with something every 30 minutes so that they're going to want to stay. Yeah, your brand rollout is going to be amazing. It's going to be fabulous. And the brand is absolutely spectacular. But okay, we've seen it and we've done it in the first 15 minutes. Now, how are we going to keep these people here so that you can keep them engaged and hopefully, obtain some new clients, keep your clients' relationships even stronger. But we're going to hit them with something exciting every single day. They're like, yes, yes, yes. They love that creativity and they love the energy of keeping it like going and keep it alive.
It's almost like, I don't want to call it a cocktail break or a coffee break, but it's almost kind of like you've got to schedule those every 30 minutes just so that the professionals
Yes,
can kind of get out of their professional headspace for a moment, just to
right.
give it a break. Because too much of anything, your body can't
No,
necessarily handle
exactly.
that.
And it's the same even with fundraising galas to kind of keep something in front of them every 20, 30 minutes, because it's amazing how quickly people will catch on to the fact that, oh my gosh, something's happening like every 30 minutes. Well, they don't want to leave because you're just building up this momentum that something spectacular is going to happen at the very end, which it will, but you keep them engaged. I think that is our job as event planners, especially with nonprofit galas, because people go to these galas uh, every weekend. So what's going to make your gala different? What's going to keep your audience engaged? And you need to really throw things at them differently. That's why I love like producing these galas, especially all over the country, is because what's happening in LA is completely different than what's happening in Dallas. And what's happening in Dallas is completely different than what is happening in New York. So I can pull from all of those resources and be like, okay, let's bring, for example, this event that I'm going to be doing in Vegas. There's this amazing entertainer in San Francisco. And I told them today, let's bring this entertainer in from San Francisco because she is absolutely amazing. And I can promise you, none of the people at your event, which is in Vegas. They're all 300 people from Las Vegas. I promise you, they have not seen her. And they're going to be like, wow. So it's something different, something special, something that just keeps them like there, because you want them to stay, right?
Absolutely. Well, and I'm glad you brought up the what you can do in one city you could never get away with in the other. And I even find that regionally within Texas, there are so many things that happen in Dallas that I could never ever in a million years get away with and do here in Austin.
Right.
Like I totally get that. So talk a little bit about the importance of understanding when you plan an event, understanding the community in which you are doing the event, and how important that is to make sure that the event's reflective of the community so you can elevate it to the next level.
Yeah, see, I love that because a lot of times, it's almost like a nonprofit will bring you in and say, "Hey, we would like to talk to you about our gala." And I feel like when I go in for that first time, yes, I want information from them about their gala, but at the same time, I quickly feel like, okay, they don't know it, but I'm going to be interviewing them. It's kind of like, okay, why are you talking to me? And then it just starts. It's like, well, last year we had our gala and we felt like it could have been more exciting or it could have been more creative, or we're looking for new ways to raise money or something of that nature. So while they're talking to me, I'm understanding, I'm learning from them. So that's why I'm like, okay, how far can we push this? Like, why are you hiring me? And then I just go into, are you based on a committee structure? Is there a committee that works on this? Yeah, there's a committee, but in the past they really haven't done very much. So that signals into me, okay, they need help with committees. Who is your audience? When they're talking about their audience, I'm thinking in my mind, it's like, ooh, okay, well, I know I can't propose this or that because I know exactly what audience they're talking about, and that is not going to go over, or like you say, that's would never fly with this particular audience. So I think as the event professional, you have to go in and ask the nonprofit all of these particular questions about, why'd you bring me in? Who is your committee? Who is your chairperson? What are your fundraising goals? Have you done this in the past? Where did you do it? What worked? What didn't work? And so it's really when they think that they're bringing in the event professional because they're going to decide whether they like them or not, it's really a two-way street. We both need to decide if this is a perfect match, because that's the only way you're going to be successful. And a lot of times I've left a lot of those that I said, oh my gosh, I totally understand everything that you're wanting for your gala, everything that you're trying to achieve, but I'm not a perfect match for this. However, here's 3 people that are perfect for the type of fundraising event that you want to do. And a lot of times I'll leave meetings and I'll be like, yeah, I want to work with them, but I need to make them understand that they don't need to have a gala. They need to have another event they need to have a more casual event. They need to have something other than a gala, because a gala sets such big expectations, and then one of the things that I suggest, I can't tell you how many times I suggest this. I'm like, let's move. I get where you're going. You want to have a gala. That's great. But let's move it off a Saturday night. Let's move it to a Thursday. Let's move it to a Friday. And then the expectation is big, but it's not so grand. A gala on a Thursday or a gala on a Friday has a different perception in people's mind than a gala on Saturday. So there's so many things that you can, suggest to them by listening to what they say. I mean, it's so important. We say it so many times. It's like, I am so amazed at the number of people that do not listen on both sides. Listening to the nonprofit, or the nonprofit not listening to the event professional. And sometimes it gets extremely frustrating. I know for the event professional, because I hear it all the time. I'm like, oh my gosh, they brought me in for my professional expertise and they are not listening to me. I know I hear that all the time from event professionals, and I'm like, well, maybe you're not communicating it the right way, or maybe you didn't listen to them in those first initial meetings to decide that, again, this wasn't the perfect match for you.
Absolutely. And the undercurrent of that, and you even said it at the beginning of the response, was you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you, quite frankly, because it's a partnership to put
Right.
something together, because it's like you two collectively are the parents birthing a child. I mean, that's
Right.
that's really what it is at the end of the day.
Exactly.
So what are some things that you look for in nonprofits before you say yes? Because you are extremely in demand, so you can't necessarily work with every nonprofit that comes your way. So what are you looking for in those nonprofits before you say yes?
I think you definitely, and I feel strongly about this. I think you definitely have to have a passion for their mission. I think it's so critically important. I got a call from a nonprofit probably about a month ago, and I was like, okay, all right. So they were like, but yeah, you want to go to lunch? Let's go talk about it. I said, no, I would actually like to come to your facility because I want to learn about your organization. We don't even need to have lunch. You know what I mean? Let's like eat before I come. We don't need to do that. I would rather spend the time to get a tour and visit and find out more about what you do. And that's what we did. It was like we spent 2 hours just touring the facility, learning about everything. I was like, oh my gosh, I love everything about this organization because you have to have a passion for it. I think it's like critically important. You just can't like say, okay, I'm going to do this and then not have a passion for it because you kind of have to feel it with them. You know what I mean? To feel like what, so you find out, what's their mission? What is their goal for this particular fundraiser? Because a lot of times you may know about the organization, but it's kind of like, okay, why are we having, and that question, I will tell you, stumps so many nonprofits. Why are we having this gala? They're like, well, because we have to have a gala. But why are we having this gala? What are we trying to inform more people in the community about what you do? Are you trying to raise money? Why are we having this? And they're like, well, I get, we need to raise some money. What do we need to raise some money for? Everybody knows what your organization is all about. You have great brand awareness, but are we raising money for a specific portion of what you do? What are we funding? So I think it's very, very important that you have a passion and you really ask those hard questions. I like to find out who the chairs are and find out what their involvement is. And then also, is there a host committee? Are there committees? How does it work? I think, and then you can decide, if again, if it's really a good match. But I think most of all, you've got to have a passion for what they do, in order to be successful. Otherwise, you're doing just another event. Because I
Abs-
think that, you fundraising events are all about, especially in the nonprofit circle, about touching people's emotions. And if it doesn't touch your emotions, then is it going to touch anybody? Can you make it touch other people's emotions? Right?
Absolutely. And I'm really glad that you bring up the passion part. Because so especially if you're listening, you're not in the Dallas market, you're in another city. Simply going for the best event producer in your area because they're the best event producer doesn't mean they're the best fit for your organization. Then you wind up producing something, but if you know that this certain, producer has experience in a certain genre, they may not relate to your genre. And it's
Right.
important to remember that you want to find the best fit. And that's what I appreciate so much about your answer is that. And what I really admire about you is I don't hear very often about event producers taking 2 hours of their day to walk in to understand a nonprofit. And I think that's why you are so good at what you do is you take the time, you stop, and you're like, is it the right fit for me? And I'm gonna take this as a learning experience, even if I don't ultimately work with this organization.
Right.
That, I
And
mean,
there's
that,
so many times when you leave
yeah,
that nonprofit that you've known about, you've heard about, so you went there and you visited, and you're like, I mean, you literally leave like in tears. You're like, oh my gosh, we have got to do something to help this organization because it's just so amazing what they're doing and how to like this should be easy from the fundraising standpoint because how and again you learn that oh my gosh okay then through your gala you're not communicating the message properly of what you're doing out here because what you're doing out here is amazing. It's not all about just throwing this fabulous event, which you need to do, but there's also a science of how are we going to get the money out of these people? How are we going to do that? And I'm one of those believers, strong believers in. I feel like by the time the invitation hits people's mailboxes, 95% of the money should be raised. And that counts on an incredible chairperson who understands their responsibility. And that's why I always ask, like the nonprofit, have you selected a chair? And they'll say, yes, yes, yes. And I'll be like, okay, what have you asked them to do? And for example, if they're like, well, we just wanted to be the chair, I'm like, because I'm one of those firm believers in to raise a lot of money in the nonprofit world. With the chair, it really needs to be a peer-to-peer solicitation. Mrs. So and so needs to ask Mrs. So and so for $20,000. And that's a peer-to-peer solicitation. And many times it's fairly easy for a chair to do that because on the other side, Mrs. So and so asked her to give $20,000 to her favorite charity. So if the chair's not raising any money, I'm like, then maybe they should have been the honorary chair. And I even feel like the honorary chair should give some type of gift, because if the chair's not giving any money, why would anybody else on the committee feel like that they need to give money? So I think it's like critically important to ask that question of, what is your goal and who is the chair and what are they doing? Because I believe that you're hiring me as an event professional for my expertise and my knowledge to be able to put this event together for you. And what I want you to understand, and I hope you understand, is that I am trying to save you time from dealing with the details of the event itself so you can focus on the fundraising aspect of it and not worry about what color the linens are. Trust me, I'm going to give you the best color linen for your theme that I can find because I love you dearly, nonprofit, but I am not going to jeopardize my relationship. So trust me that I'm going to deliver on my side with my expertise while you're out on your side raising like so much money so that by the time the invitation hits the mailbox, we are almost home free and all we have to do is raise money at the gala. We're not trying to catch up by the time the gala gets there. That's all in the bank and done. Everything we raise at the gala is going to be this amazing amount of money that goes straight to the charity, which is wonderful.
That's fantastic. Now, you talked a little bit about science earlier and all that. So part of it is sometimes certain periodic elements don't mesh in an event. An event can maybe unexpected things happen. So, when you put two periodic elements together, it may not necessarily be so easy. And, what I have always appreciated about you, anytime you've ever told me about something that's happened in one of your events, you are always so calm about it. You talk about it so matter-of-factly. So talk about how people can stay calm, whether they're the event producer, whether they're the chair, whether they're on the committee, whether they're a guest. How can they stay calm when these unexpected things happen?
Yes, we all need that meme everywhere around us that says, keep calm and carry on, right? It's like that's what we all need because, but I always tell people it's like we have to think about these things in advance because one of the things that I always tell nonprofits going into it from our initial meetings all the way through the gala or the fundraising event is let's always remember less stress, more success. Less stress, more success. Just kind of that's what we're not trying to create madness, but we have to plan ahead for it because things do happen. And there's so many scenarios that kind of walk through before. So let's like think about, okay, it's the night of the gala and we all live in this electronic world now. Everybody's bidding on their phones and blah, 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 blah. The Wi-Fi goes down. Now, I can't tell you how many times that has happened. So we have got to, let's plan ahead. Let's get out all of our old school bid sheets just in case we need them. It costs absolutely nothing to print them off. Let's print one, have the committee do it. Let's have an old school bid sheet ready for every single item. So if the Wi-Fi goes down, we can quickly go around all the silent auction tables and in literally 6 minutes, we've got a paper bid sheet down on every single one of them. Because that Wi-Fi going down, you can be in the finest hotel in the world and the Wi-Fi could go out. Or what happens if all the power goes out? What happens if there's an act of God? And what are we going to do if a storm hits that afternoon? The gala is that night, and we know that we have to pay for everything. It's like the gala is in 5 hours and it's just been a horrible rainstorm. Nobody's coming. It's flooding. what are we going to do? Are we, let's talk to the caterer in advance about, hey, the next day when everything's better, can we deliver a box something to everyone's home? Can we, because we don't want people calling us saying, can I have my money back? Because no, you cannot. But let's also acknowledge that, okay, we know that you spent $500, $1,000 to come to this. So we're going to deliver a nice little box, dinner, lunch, whatever, from the caterer to your home the next day. Just think we're gonna take the grand floral arrangements and we're gonna just pull them apart, and we're gonna end up having 25 smaller fabulous arrangements that we make, and we're going to send them to all 25 of the lead sponsors' homes. I mean, you just have to think about all this stuff because we live, especially in Texas, where weather is so unpredictable. We've got to have all those backup plans, and nobody ever wants to talk about those backup plans, but you need to dedicate one meeting to where all we're going to talk about is what if scenarios that could happen. And it's like a fun brainstorming exercise, but we know if something does happen, we are prepared for it. And again, I think that you have to remain calm about like what it was. I mean, I just had one recently last year where the power went out in the building. And who would have ever thought that that would have happened? And it wasn't because of a storm. There was an auto accident like 2 blocks over, and that car ended up hitting the transformer box or the pole or whatever so hard that it literally put the power out for 4 city blocks. And I mean, we were like in, oh my gosh, we have no power. I mean, no power. No backup power was available because the State Fair of Texas was going. So there's no generators anywhere in the city during that time. The venue had backup power, but when it hit that box, it hit it so hard it even blew out their backup power. So, but we had a plan in place. The auction services companies that you use a lot of times they're already sending out messages to everyone. You can bid on this thing, you can bid on that thing. So we thought, okay, we're going to use them for all of our messaging because we knew once the power came back on, the city kept saying it was going to come on, So we pushed everything back 30 minutes. Well, we were informing all the guests on the auction, pushing out text to them via that way. So you just have to remain calm. It's like, and sometimes it's hard because I just want to be like, we've been planning this for a year, but that if you thought through it in advance with the leaders on your committees and your principals and all, you're going to be okay, and that you always have to step back and go, okay, the guests are going to understand. There's literally 15 inches of water on the streets. I mean, they're not going to be mad at us because they can't get to the gala. They're going to understand, especially if we're calm and present everything to them in a professional manner.
So speaking of professional, one thing that a lot of events struggle with is celebrities. How to engage a celebrity. When should I engage a celebrity? How should I ask the celebrity? So talk about what advice you would give. And I know you've worked with many, many, many over the years. What advice would you give to a person or organization looking to engage a celebrity for their nonprofit event?
Well, first and foremost, every event thinks they need or want a celebrity, and so many people have no idea what that cost. I'm always amazed, like when you're sitting in a meeting and somebody will be like, okay, I know it sounds like a lot, but do you think that if we spent $50,000, we could get Taylor Swift? I'm like, what?
Add a couple zeros, at least.
There's a fabulous Taylor Swift impersonator that we can get for 35,000, but it's like but seriously, they have no idea how, because and I always tell people, okay, what you have to remember is a lot of these celebrities that everybody wants at their event, they don't have to work. So if somebody is going to pay them to come to a private event, then a lot of times they're going to ask a lot of money because they're like, I don't have to work for the rest of my life. But if somebody wants to pay me $1 million, okay, I'll come. So I think you have to, first of all, get a realistic handle on the cost. And then also always tell people, it's like if a celebrity quotes, all right, let's just say it's Blake Shelton. Who knows? Blake Shelton's going to be $500,000. I can promise you that what they're quoting is their fee. So then there's also a rider that goes along with any artist. And you can always pretty much, as a general rule, just a starting point, the rider's going to be almost equal to the fee. So there's $500,000 on the other side in private jets, in production, in band, in food, in hotels. And so now you're up to $1 million. But a lot of people think it's just the fee. It's not. But most importantly, I think the thing that I always ask nonprofits is, what is this going to do as it relates to your fundraising? Because, I mean, your gala sells out every year. And I know you want to bump it up a notch, but do we have to bump it up $1 million notch? And if they say, well, we think it's really important, we think it would add so much, then I challenge them, okay, if you really want to do this, let's try to find somebody to underwrite that. Taylor Swift is presented by XYZ Corporation or whoever. So, and that when you throw that challenge out to them, they start thinking about, like, I'm like, this is literally going to cost you $1 million. Where is this money coming from? And a lot of times they realize it's like, we really don't need a headline act. Yeah, that'd be great, but are we going to raise the ticket prices? Do we have an underwriter for this? So I think you just have to be so very careful. And then you also have to realize that it's different nowadays, because I feel like everything that comes out of anyone's mouth, whether it be through song, through comedy, through speaking, through whatever, is offensive to someone. So are you going to deter any attendees because they don't like what this person stands for? And you have to be so careful with celebrities too, and be very specific. And I will say 99% of the time they will adhere to it. You have to say, you can't say no political commentary, no jokes, no this. I mean, you have to be just this list that's like this long. And they, like I say, they're being paid a lot of money, so they'll adhere to it. But you can't do any of this. It's almost like it's just got to be perfectly bland, but bland in an amazing way. No offensive anything. So it's just when you're booking celebrities, I mean, that's a long conversation, a hard conversation. And I get they do bring value, especially if there's a lot of events that deal with celebrities where they have to, now they're locked into, for example, the Cattle Barons Ball in Dallas, amazing event, the largest fundraiser for the American Cancer Society in the country. It's fabulous. They have a headline act every year. Well, that's their deal. They have to have a headline. So it's like, oh my gosh, we have to have a headline act. So what are we going to do? For example, they had Shania Twain last year. They got Carrie Underwood this year. They have that challenge of, we have to stay within this budget window, but we also have to up it. So you're thinking, okay, every time I'm like, Shania Twain, Carrie Underwood. I mean, how do you keep getting up? That's got to cost some every year. So you have to be so careful about it. And I get it does bring benefit, but it's worth very, very much thought to decide if you really want to do that.
Absolutely. And speaking of much thought, in addition to you being a fabulous event producer, you also MC events. So, that's another very critical part of setting the tone. And again, going back to what you can and cannot say, that's tailor-made,
right?
Pun intended with Taylor Swift, since we've been talking about her, tailor-made for that. So talk about, how you bring fun to an event as an MC and what makes for a great MC in general.
Oh, I love emceeing events. I think that it takes a lot of time. I always tell people it takes a lot of research, because again, you really have to know the group. You have to know the demographics of the group and what the organization itself stands for. I think you have to be enthusiastic. You have to be energetic, and you have to know that you're really, guiding the evening through its, journey. And you have to be level-headed. You have to be quick on your feet. You have to be organized. You have to be completely flexible, knowing that you're probably going to get the final script, like 3 days before, and then it's going to have a lot of changes on it. You need to put an app on your phone about pronunciation so you can test out how to pronounce this name.
Very important.
That thing is like a lifesaver. But I think emceeing events is so much fun. It can bring, I think it's important for nonprofits, especially, to have an MC, because again, a lot of times the person who is the CEO of the organization, or the director of marketing of the organization, or even the chair people of the event may not be the best public speakers, and they may not want to do that. So you don't want to force them into that role, and I think that an MC can fill that bill for you, and like I say, and keep the evening going along at a great pace, and that's so important to what you're doing.
Absolutely. And, you have really just given us just a masterclass on what it takes to put a successful event on. And I know we're coming up on time, but I want to end with this one question. And I can't think of a better person to answer this than you. What is one thing all successful events have in common?
I think one thing that they all have in common, which I love, again, like we talked about, is I think that they bring people together, which I think is so critically important, and that's it's such a beautiful thing that happens, because it's a gathering of human beings, which we all need to do more, and they come together for a common cause, a common goal, and we don't do that enough now. We really don't. And if you can bring all these people from diverse backgrounds together to celebrate and to honor and to discuss and to teach people about the organization, I think that is just like so beautiful. Is that events are the opportunity to bring people together that may never, ever, ever have thought about being together. They think, oh, this side or that side. We live in such a world of division right now. To think that events are still out there bringing people together for a common cause, and everybody's like happy and celebrating, and you're doing good. It's the most beautiful feeling in the world.
I completely agree with that. And that's why I do what I do, is the exact reason you said. You get to bring all different types of people together in a space for something good, and you get to smile, laugh, and have a good time doing it. And Steve, I can't thank you enough for taking the time today. Tell people where they can find you online.
I love it. They can go to www.stevekemble, that's KEMBLE.com. I'm on Facebook, Steve Kemble, Instagram, Steve Kemble, LinkedIn, Steve Kemble, X, Steve Kemble, all that good stuff. You can find me everywhere, and you better watch out, because I will find you.
Well, anyone would be lucky enough for you to find them to produce their event. And again, I had so much fun chatting with you, Steve, and thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And that will do it for this episode of Fun and Fundraising. I'm your host, Rob Giardinelli, reminding you to keep it fun, keep it interesting, and your guests will have a great time. Have a great day, everyone, and take care.